Hey all. So I'm back for another Spotlight with Context video, and I'm not gonna lie, this might be my favorite one I ever do, because this is the one on my first champion that I ever designed as an employee of Kabam. So this one's gonna be fun. Let's head right into Absorbing Man. I'm really excited about him. Starting with his base stats, these are above average but not exceptional health pools. This is for a rank 3 level 45 6-star here. That is a below average attack pool that he's going to make up for elsewhere. And then that prestige is pretty darn good. The 13,750, that's for a 6-star rank 3. 15,740, that's where he lands as a 6-star rank 4. I believe that puts him just below Omega Sentinel or just above, one side or the other. But either way, he's going to be cleanly outside the top 5, but inside the top 10. He's not going to be someone that you rank just for prestige if you're pushing top 10 AQ. But if you, say, badly want to take Absorbing Man to rank 5 and you're in the top 45 for AQ, then he's not going to set your prestige back that much. Funny how that worked out. Anyway, moving on to his strengths, the number one is definitely immunities. Now, this is intentionally overstating it, but if you count a certain way and squint, you can say that he has 8 different immunities, which is very new for Mystics, right? Like, traditionally, Hazard Shift nodes, you've had very few options. Bleed immune Mystics, you have Man-Thing, you have Mangog, you have Claire. I'm probably missing someone, but those are the 3 that came to mind to me. Oh, and Dormammu. See? That's why I forgot. For Hazard Shift, Poison, and Incinerate, you have a bunch of half immunes, but no true full immunes. Mephisto still gets the Incinerate on him. Ghost Rider is Incinerate immune and Bleed immune, but not Poison immune. Dormammu is not Incinerate immune. You didn't really have anybody who could do this. Absorbing Man covers a lot of these bases. He is the new immunity king within the Mystic class. And he gets stronger when those immunities are triggered. So he's going to be very good for that. He is incredibly adaptable. He does have 2 primary modes. There's a physical one and an energy one. But that covers a lot of the basic problems in our game and gives you a way to do damage against most opponents. So if you choose your form properly, then he's going to be helpful to you in a lot of places. And then another big one, targeted buff control. He does not have any nullify, he doesn't have any fate seal, stagger, neutralize, none of that. But for the most annoying buffs in the game, he dramatically reduces their duration, kind of the way that Mojo does, and that's going to allow him to get around a lot of big problems. So, on the other hand, all of those abilities I just mentioned require upkeep. They require you to stay in his forms, and those durations are a little bit tough to upkeep without something about the fight or the way you approach it giving you an edge. So you have a lot of tools for that, which we'll get into later, but that is the central challenge of playing Absorbing Man, is maintaining uptime on his forms. Another thing, while he has access to very high resistances, he's extremely vulnerable to direct damage. So if you can knock out his bleed immunity, then bleed works really well. Poison works really well against him almost all the time. Degen and direct damage like voids just cut right through him. And if you manage to land crits on him, he does have some crit resistance, but if you manage to land crits and cut through some of that resistance, that will also work. So he does have some significant vulnerabilities. Obviously, as an attacker, try to avoid them. As a defender, try to exploit them. And then he is also weak against opponents with critical resistance. And that's because so much of his damage scales off of not like big crits. He's not a damage dealt character like Red Hulk or Hercules, but he still needs to land crits for his damage to be particularly good. So champions like Doctor Doom or Killmonger that cut down on that are going to harsh his damage pretty significantly. So then moving into actual abilities, first off, like I mentioned earlier, he does have 20% crit resistance. This means that there are a fair number of champions in the game that just cannot crit against him at all. But remember that this is before the precision mastery kicks in. So a fair amount of them still can land some crits. Additionally, he is fully immune to armor break and armor shattered. Those effects don't even apply to him. It's like Man-Thing, not like Rintrah. But on the flip side, his critical penetration is reduced. And what that means is that normally critical hits ignore 80% of physical resistance, energy resistance, and armor. So if you're fighting somebody like, let's just say, Odin, who has a massive armor up on him, your hits aren't going to be doing a lot of damage, but your crits are. And that's because only 20% of his armor is protecting him when you land a critical hit. When Absorbing Man lands a critical hit, his critical penetration is only 60%, and so 40% of his opponent's resistances are being factored in. So that sounds like a weird ability to give him. I get that. It does make him weaker, but what that allows us to do is build a character that cares a lot about landing critical hits without the hits themselves being the be-all, end-all source of damage. And we'll kind of get into that as we go. So this is the targeted buff control I talked about. He reduces the duration of indestructible, immortality, unstoppable, and unblockable buffs by 90%. So Hulkling can go unblockable if you just stand there and let him hit into your block, but if he just hits into your block and gains that last pierce and goes unblockable and you back off, it's probably going to be gone before it could matter. When a Nihilus hits into you and lands a Stifle, and then he throws a heavy attack, normally you dash back and you can't punish that heavy attack because he's unstoppable. Well, that unstoppable is going to be long gone here, and so you can safely hit in. There are a lot of places where this matters an absolute ton. Like I said, he has no answer to a lot of buffs in the contest, but the most annoying ones, he just runs right through. Additionally, not that you would do this often in war, but same as with Mojo, you can run him with Black Widow Clairvoyant and Ghost Rider on the team, which reduces the duration of all buffs on the opponent by 30%, and that would cut all of these down to 0 for the most part. So, moving on, this is just talking about the overall structure of his forms. His special attacks are what put him into his forms. We'll talk about that later. He can only gain the benefits of one at a time, and these form changes cannot fail due to ability accuracy modification, which is obviously very important because if this is where your immunities are coming from, you don't want to have a bunch of bleeds on you, throw the special that gives you bleed immunity, and have it fail. Additionally, this also means that somebody like Archangel or Nick Fury is going to have that much worse of a time against him as a defender. It's not impossible, but it's pretty difficult. So, he will start each form in Black Uru by default. We'll get to what that means later. But you can change this default in the pre-fight menu. And the important thing to note is that this does persist. So that's really important because if you're taking a lane where you want Incinerate immunity the entire time, then you're going to want to change this default to Magma, and it will just be that much easier for you to run through it. But the reason I mention this is that if you take, say, 2 fights where you need Incinerate immunity, and then you take a fight where you need his other immunity, you have to remember to switch back. The good thing is this is all tracked in his persistent charge. 0 is the default Uru, 1 is the changed Magma. As long as you're keeping an eye on that, you shouldn't get surprised. Now this more matters on defense, but when he is struck by a heavy attack while recovering from one of his own special attacks, he's going to lose his current form. It will be deactivated early. It cannot be deactivated again for 20 seconds. And so there is a separate cooldown for each special, and what this means is that you're going to want to say, like, bait out the special 1, punish it with a heavy attack, and then try to push him to the special 2, because if he throws another special one right away, it will probably be on cooldown, and even if you punish it with a heavy attack, it won't knock him out of it, and you could be getting yourself into some trouble. But if you push him up to the special 2, that probably won't be on cooldown, you can punish that, and then you can hopefully go back to safely baiting out the special 1. So just make sure to alternate them when you're fighting him as a defender. This shouldn't ever come up on attack unless you really mess up. Now, you heard me say earlier that one of the biggest challenges to Absorbing Man is upkeep on your forms, maintaining that uptime. So these next two abilities are two of the most important ways to do that, because they're going to pause your forms, giving you more time to get to the next special attack and activate them again. Whenever a buff ends on the opponent, not expires, not is nullified, but ends, including when they're replaced, you get the pause for 3 seconds, also when Absorbing Man is immune to a debuff. So imagine you're facing somebody like Hulkling. You can see this in the deep dive if you watch carefully. And Hulkling already has 4 regeneration buffs, which is his max. You hit him again, another regeneration buff procs, and the oldest one is removed. That still triggers this pause, and so if you're fighting somebody with a lot of buffs, as long as they keep reactivating them, you get these pauses. Similarly, this applies to any debuff that he is immune to. So that works on the armor break that he's immune to. That works on any immunity given to him by his forms itself. It would also apply to anything he gets from a synergy. Or if he's on a stun immune node and you try to stun him, as long as you are using the regular version of parry and not Magneto House of X, that's a stun debuff that would count. The other big pause requires a little bit more discussion, but interrupting the opponent's basic attack with a light attack is going to pause his current form for 6 seconds, so significantly longer, and give you a small vulnerability passive. So vulnerability is a new effect we're using. It's just energy vulnerability and physical vulnerability at the same time. That's all it is. So pretty easy to remember there. We need to talk about what interrupting a basic attack means, though, because that applies to anywhere in the opponent's basic attack animation. So the obvious way that this works is if you intercept the opponent with a light attack. But this can also work if an opponent throws a full combo into your block and then you respond with a light attack fast enough to catch them. You have to be careful with this, because if you're too late, you could get parried, right? But this is already a way that high-tier players manage stun-immune fights. And so with Absorbing Man, if you respond to that combo ender with a light instead of a medium, you get this nice pause. This also works if you counter your opponent's heavy attack with a light attack. Now, the light attack has really good reach for a punch, but it is a punch. So it's important to note that it's also a very quick punch, as is the one after it. Against some opponents, if you're trying to land this light and interrupt their heavy attack, you will need to throw the light twice. One in particular that I tested this against is Korg. This is a way that people used to deal with Korg without parrying him. They would bait out a heavy and do 2 light attacks. Doesn't work with all animations. Does work with Absorbing Mans. So start looking for defenders where you can do that, and you'll have much better control over your form upkeep with him. Refined is where a lot of his power comes from. You have access to these forms, but if the special attacks activate the forms, why do you care about activating them again? A big reason is Refined, because if he's already in a form when he activates it again, then it refreshes the duration fully, and now you're in the Refined version of the form. So I'm going to say the word Refined a lot right in a little bit. Just run with me. So while you're Refined, all personal bursts of damage benefit from 300% of Absorbing Man's critical damage multiplier. The reason that's so high is because his critical damage multiplier is relatively low, but these bursts still get a huge effect. So the yellow numbers aren't going to be that big, the red numbers are. Additionally, those bursts cannot have their ability accuracy modified while he's refined. So when he's not refined, you could go up against somebody like Cersei, your bursts would fail, but as soon as you get that refined, Cersei, Hercules, Domino, they can't stop you. Additionally, special attacks are going to be unblockable. This applies to the special attack that would refine him. So if you're seeing Absorbing Man in Black Uru form, and he's about to throw a special one before it ends, watch out, that special's going to be unblockable. Additionally, it means that if you're using Absorbing Man as an attacker, you can get better openings with this. If your form's about to expire, you can just throw the special into the air and hope it will connect. Sometimes that works out really well for you. Another weirder ability he gets while refined is this power absorption mechanic here, where when he blocks a hit, it reduces the opponent's ability power rate by 72% until he stops blocking again, and all of that power that he stops the opponent from getting, he gets. So, ability power, as a refresher, is power not gained by landing or taking hits. So, Hyperion's power gain, Havoc's slow passive power gain, what nodes give to defenders on a node like Kinetic Transference or Spite, any of those things, he will blunt it significantly, so you're under less of a threat, and he will gain power himself. And of course, that power is going to get you closer to your next special attack, which is going to help you out. This does account for the opponent's ability power rate being modified. So if you're fighting somebody on node 54, where they would have 300% ability power rate, Absorbing Man is only going to reduce that by 72% to 228. But he is still going to gain the exact amount of power he denied from the opponent. The one time this doesn't work is if the opponent's power rate is somehow reduced to exactly 0, which would be difficult since he's reducing it 72% and there aren't many 28% petrifies out there. Or if the opponent has no power at all, because then there's no power change to measure. That's just kind of a tech limitation that we're dealing with right now, but oftentimes this is pretty helpful. This is not going to make him a top-tier power controller. That is not his goal or his role, but it does make it that much easier to fight Hyperion, Arcus, certain nodes like Kinetic Transference. So moving on to Morph Charges, this right here is what you get for being really good at upkeep. Because you may have noticed I talked about these pauses and having time left on his forms. Well, why do you need even more time left? Don't you just need enough time to get back to the special? No, you want as much as possible because that's going to give you Morph Charges. So when you refresh or change forms, meaning basically whenever you throw a special attack, you're going to get Morph Charges equal to the remaining percentage of his previous form's duration. That is a complicated sentence, but what it means is if the special one giving you Black Uru form has a base duration of 10 seconds and you have 5 seconds left, you get 50 Morph Charges. The Special 2's Magma form has a base duration of 18 seconds, so to get 50 Morph Charges you would need 9 seconds left on it. This does mean that if you're really, really good at pauses, you can build Morph Charges faster with the Special 1. It also means that in a fight where you don't particularly care which form you're in, you can gain charges faster by building up to like almost 3 bars of power, throwing a Special 2, and then immediately throwing a Special 1 into your next combo, because you're going to have a ton of time left on the Special 2. This also is base duration, so anything that extends the duration of his forms is going to mean more Morph Charges. If you're at all lost, don't worry. That plays simpler than it sounds. It just means try to pause his forms a lot, throw a lot of specials, and eventually you're going to get Morph Charges. Another big way he ramps his Morph Charges is being immune to Armor Breaker, Armor Shattered specifically. So Annihilus hitting into block, standing near Terrax in Rockfield, standing near Arcus, All of these things are just going to jump up his morph charges quite a bit and give him that much more ammo. The reason you care about building morph charges is that as soon as you have 150, the icon will turn green, and that tells you that you can perform a medium light medium to auto refine your current form, which remember does refresh its duration. So if you're about to run out and you have enough morph charges, you can stay in your form by doing this. And it's going to inflict a big 30-second vulnerability passive of 2100 potency, and that's really going to drop their physical and energy vulnerability attributes, and you get one of those for every 150 charges consumed. So as soon as you cross 150, you can get one of these. If you go all the way up to the max of 600, you can get 4. Additionally, when you're at that max of 600, like it says, activating a special attack and entering a form is just going to automatically cash out your morph charges, refine that form even if you weren't in one already, and place all 4 of those vulnerabilities on the opponent. So, like I said, this can help you stay in a single form, because if you're about to run out of duration on them and you don't have enough power for a special yet, you can medium, light, medium to refine the form. But the other thing it can do is if for some reason you need to switch forms in a fight, as long as you've built up enough morph charges, you can go from Uru to Magma and very quickly refine it with medium, light, medium, so that you only have to throw one of those specials instead of 2 to get access to all of your refined benefits. So touching on the heavy attack, this is kind of where the big red numbers come from. Because we already talked about how when you're in a refined form, your red numbers get a lot bigger when you crit. But Absorbing Man doesn't have particularly good critical stats, except when he heavies. Because you're going to get a certain amount of critical rating if the opponent is stunned. So this is how much you get when you parry heavy. This is about 45% chance to land a crit against a vanilla opponent. And if they're not stunned, you gain a much larger amount of critical rating. This is actually only twice as strong as far as how much, or as far as how likely you are to crit. It just looks way, way higher because of how diminishing returns works. But this is about a 90% chance to crit, so against an opponent with no crit resistance, if you manage to land your heavy while they're not stunned, meaning if you heavy counter them, then this works really, really well. Additionally, you can keep all of that critical rating through the full special attack if you cancel this heavy into the special. Now, the first hit of the special does have to land. This is because otherwise you could just charge your heavy into the air and throw an unblockable special, and there would be literally no challenge to this. But as long as that first hit lands and then you activate the special, which will probably be unblockable, then you do get that full benefit throughout the special, and you can land a bunch of big red numbers. It's very, very fun. So, you've already heard me dance around the effects a little bit, but the special one is how you activate Form of Black Uru. This is the physical one. You get immunity to bleed, you get immunity to shock, which works really well on that hazard shift node in the second half of Alliance War, and you get roughly 80% physical resistance. Remember, this is affected by challenger rating, so it will go up and down depending on your opponent, but you're going to feel pretty chunky. Additionally, all of your attacks are going to deal a small amount of physical damage, but this can crit, like we talked about, if you're refined, and then it is a much, much larger amount of physical damage. Specific to Black Uru, when he's refined, Absorbing Man can land crits through block, and his bursts of damage will go through the opponent's block, meaning that he can also land critical bursts of damage through the opponent's block. This is fun as an attacker and can be good for invade lanes, but this is not key to his intended playstyle most of the time. He's not a Valkyrie or a Massacre. He doesn't gain power when hitting into block, he can just do decent damage. You do want to watch out for this on defense, though. It can hurt. The special 2 is how you activate your Magma form. This is the energy form. You're immune to Incinerate, Cold Snap, and Frostbite. You get that same massive energy resistance. This is about comparable to Guardian at max sig. And all of your attacks are going to do a burst of energy damage. Plus, they're now considered to deal energy themselves. Meaning if you're facing somebody like Korg, who punishes physical contact attacks, Absorbing Man won't care because as soon as you're in Magma, all of your attacks deal energy damage, like Claire or Doom or anyone else. So, very powerful ability there, but it does go away as soon as you fall out of Magma. So be careful if you're having trouble upkeeping your forms and you're fighting a Korg. Additionally, specific to Magma form, while you're refined, all contact is going to inflict an Incinerate passive on the opponent. Now, this is an Incinerate, so immunity can get around this, but you really don't want to run into this on defense. It means that you'll get incinerated just by hitting him, or by blocking him, or even by hitting his block. But on the flip side, as an attacker, that means all of those things help you out. You can get a lot of damage out of this, and because it is energy damage, this is amplified by those vulnerabilities that you're going to be putting on your opponent. So, in a lot of fights, like I said, it can be easier to ramp the Uru form faster. It can be a little bit easier to get more morph charges because the pauses don't care about base duration. You're also often going to feel a little bit chunkier because there are more sources of physical damage in our game than there are energy. But the flip side is that if you are just going for straight damage, the special 2 with all of those little incinerates is probably going to be where you want to be because it just does that much more damage. Moving on to the special 3, this is your classic long fight ramp special 3. You're going to get an indefinite cruelty passive. It looks very small, but remember that his crit damage is multiplied by 3 when it's applied to his bursts, so this is pretty significant. And you can get 2 of these in a single special 3 if you make it here with a form already refined. These only stack up to 5, but they can have a pretty big impact on his damage output over the course of a long fight. Additionally, because Absorbing Man is a Mystic and has access to Mystic Dispersion, and shortens some buffs on the opponent, you can get accidentally pushed red sometimes. You don't have to fear that because his special 3 automatically activates whatever form you were already using, automatically refines it, and pauses it for 15 seconds. So if you're having trouble accessing the rest of his kit, if you're having trouble doing damage because you can't seem to land the pauses, you're not getting to your specials in time to go refined, just aim for the special 3. It will handle the refined for you. You don't have to worry about upkeep for 15 seconds. And during that 15 seconds, you get a big old chunk of critical rating, which is going to allow you to land more crit bursts without worrying about your heavies. So if for some reason you have to throw the special 3, you're going to have at least 15 seconds of a good time. Moving on to his signature ability, we've talked about base duration a few times here, and that's because the signature ability improves duration. So the 10 seconds of Black Uru you get from Special 1 will become 14 seconds at max sig. At sig 1, this is only a 10% increase, but it scales pretty well. Like I said earlier, that does mean you're going to more easily build morph charges when Absorbing Man is high sig. The other big thing that you get access to with Absorbing Man's signature ability is a regen. So it's non-stacking, you can't get a ton of them, and it is missing health, so don't expect him to perform like King Groot. But this happens whenever you consume morph charges, meaning that if you're going for max damage and you build up to throwing a special at 600 charges, you'll get 4 vulnerabilities, a single regen, or you can get more of these by cashing out your morph charges early and doing medium, light, medium regularly, and you can pretty much have full uptime on the regen in certain fights. So he can stay pretty darn healthy. The other thing to remember about missing health is that if you're already healthy, it will look pretty anemic, But if you've messed up in the fight and you're down around like 20% or so, this can be very, very strong. Additionally, as a defender, this just happens whenever Absorbing Man throws a special, basically. So have some way in mind to handle that regen, or get good at knocking him out of his forms, because the last bullet point tells you that these regens go away if the forms are deactivated early, which means if his specials are punished with a heavy. And it's also paused when he's struck with true damage. So against somebody like Corvus, for instance, he's going to be healing a lot. Now, moving on to his synergies, we are going to start with the most powerful ones. Like it says, this is 6-star or higher only. But it's a doozy. So, a Mortal Abomination or a Mortal Hulk allows Absorbing Man to also have access to poison immunity, and that's just all the time. You don't have to be in a form for it. Already strong. But what that means is that he can take Hazard Shift, Poison, Incinerate, because he now will have the poison immunity. If you're asking why did I put this in a synergy that feels mean, well, part of the reason is that it really is that powerful, and so I do think it's fair. The other reason is that so that he isn't a worse defender, because one of the best counters to him on defense is poison, which science has a few different ways to access, including, notably, a Mortal Abomination, and I didn't want to close that off entirely. So that's why you're seeing it here in the synergy. It's also going to make him a lot less of a problem in Battlegrounds, but it is a really good synergy. Additionally, if you don't need the poison immunity, your forms just last 3 seconds longer, period. So remember, that's a lot more morph charges. That's basically 30 more morph charges all the time on the special one, and a little over 15 every time on the special 2. So I-Bomb himself is going to get energy resistance for each poison on himself. This is similar to how much physical resistance he gets from poisons on himself already, but it is going to be higher than most I-Bombs right now, because this is about what an I-Bomb would gain as a 7-star. So it's a little bit further out. Additionally, Immortal Hulk is going to gain 20% extra ability accuracy just for his immortality. If you're using him in story content, this usually isn't too important, but this is huge for war because it means that the Assassin Mastery won't stop him from going immortal, and that means that you can actually use Immortal Hulk in war. Whether you should, I will leave for the community to figure out, but this has been something that a lot of us have wanted for a very long time, because it's a bummer that he wasn't... It wasn't even a good idea to try using him in war, and now you can. So I'm really excited about that one. Moving on to this other one with Daredevil Hell's Kitchen. He's going to make Daredevil's buffs last longer, so it's going to be much easier to work through his rotation and feel like you're getting something out of it. And then for Absorbing Man, you get extra block proficiency below 15 combo. This is going to make it easier to bait heavies if you're trying to do that for getting pauses with the light interrupts, or if you're trying to land your own heavies to cancel into a special. And then above 15, that extra critical rating means you probably care less about landing those heavies in the first place because you're critting more often anyway. Really good synergy for Absorbing Man. Moving on to the one you get with a 4-star Absorbing Man, he allows Rogue to pause the timer for her replicated buffs during the opponent's special attacks, meaning that you don't automatically lose it if the opponent has a special longer than Deadpool's special 1, basically. Because for anyone who's played Rogue, you know that frustration where it's like, alright, I'm staying aggressive. Oh no, I have to bait a special attack. It's more than 2 hits. All of this work is down the drain. So hopefully Rogue feels a lot better to play. I'm really curious to see what we get out of the community when this one goes live and what she can do. And then for Absorbing Man, not the most powerful of effects, but it is very broad. Non-damaging debuffs other than stuns are just cut in half. So this means if he's facing like a short burst lockdown node that tries to put a heal block on you, he'll cut the length of the heal block in half. This also means that if Absorbing Man is taken into war this season, where defenders put glancing debuff or unsteady debuffs on the attacker when they throw a special, well, that's a non-damaging debuff. Absorbing Man with Rogue on the team will cut those in half and get back to business that much faster. The 3-star has a synergy with this is OG Thor and Thor Jane Foster. Absorbing Man himself gets access to an armor break debuff. It's not a particularly strong one, but it's solid. It's more of a utility armor break than anything, kind of like Hercules is with Captain America. And then Thor himself gets a pretty juicy armor break on his heavy attack. It doesn't last for very long. You only get 2 of them, but it gives him access to an armor break if he can't stun the opponent or if he is not duped, and makes him significantly more flexible. And then Jane has, I think, been underrated unfairly, but one really good complaint about her is that she's super reliant on shock damage, and there's more shock immunity in the Cosmic class than anywhere else. So, with Absorbing Man on the team, she just replaces her shocks with degens, and they will do everything for her that shocks do. You'll reduce the ability power rate, you'll get the nullifies, you'll get the stuns, all of that should work off of these degens. Now, this is not only if the opponent is immune, because then she wouldn't work on somebody like Surfer, but this does mean that because you don't have control over the replacement, she would be slightly worse against somebody like Null, who has degen resistance. Personally, I consider that worth the trade, but just something I wanted to call out. And then with Titania, because of course he's going to have a synergy with his wife, his medium and heavy attacks gain a pretty chunky amount of critical damage rating. Remember that this gets tripled in his own kit. This is how much he gets from 5 special 3s. You will notice this if you're in a refined form. It basically gives him haymakers from a damage perspective, and then Titania becomes bleed immune. It's not the rarest immunity, but it is relatively rare in the science class specifically. Off the top of my head, we only have Luke and Thing other than this, so I'm sure it will end up coming in handy. Additionally, any further immunities on buff immune champions tend to end up mattering in my experience. So that's Absorbing Man. I knew this one was going to be long because I had a lot to talk about since I'm the one who came up with these abilities. But yeah, I'm just really, really excited for him to come to the game. It was fun just talking about him here. Good luck to everyone who goes for him. I think he's going to be really good. And I also want to take this moment to just thank Kabam for hiring me. This job has been absolutely amazing. I love it. And thank you to the rest of the design team for putting up with the newbie in your midst, coming to playtests, giving excellent feedback, letting me solve the problems, trusting me to do that. And then a huge separate shout out to the art team for delivering this incredibly tall ask of a character who basically shifts between 3 different forms at will and has another one in the special 3. It's been an incredible journey, and I am so happy to be here right now. So hope you guys all found this interesting, and if you haven't checked out the Zemo one yet, please give that a look. Additionally, I'm not sure if it's dropping today or sometime soon, but I recorded an interview with Vega where we went over the design process, so if you have any questions about that, be sure to check out that video. If it is out, I will put it in the description, and I will try to update the description as soon as it comes out, if not. But until then, thank you all so much for watching, and take care.